All right, man. Listen, another night is about to get started. My name is Chris Williams. I want to say thank you so much for watching. This is The World According to Chris. You know how we've been doing. This is the Dynamic Father series. And for tonight's conversation, if you missed the last one, go back. You can go watch it right now. It is available. But for tonight, what I want you to do is I'm not going to tell you to grab your popcorn. I am going to say grab you a pad and a pen because the two gentlemen that I have tonight who are on with me are some incredible gentlemen. I've gotten to just get to know them from afar. We are part of a content creator group. And so one of the things that I have been really big about for the year 2021 is bringing these types of conversations to the forefront. There's a lot of things about being a dad and a father that are, I won't necessarily say just closed door conversations, but it's hard to find people willing to have the discussion and put it out there in the forefront. Well, I've been able to find different men from different walks of life. If you saw the one, the last one, I'm telling you, it was absolutely great. It was incredible. And I expect tonight to be even better. So with that being said, you can find us right now. If you're watching live, thank you. We are on YouTube. If you're looking at this on Facebook, YouTube and Facebook don't always play nice. So if you do a comment, you're going to need to hop over on the YouTube. You can leave a comment. We can be able to respond to you from there. If you're watching the replay, first of all, thank you. Make sure that you share this however you found this. I want to say thank you up front and in advance. My hope is that you get something from this that you can actually apply to your life. So with that being said, let's bring up the first gentleman. Man, I am more impressed with these two guys as I've gotten to kind of see what they do, some of their channel work, some of the things that they're putting out there as content creators. And I'm just really honored, honestly, to be able to have them on the show today. So the first gentleman is someone that I am really enjoying his way to articulate and demonstrate life through his creativity. I'll let him kind of talk about what he does, some of his family dynamics, as you know how we do with the show. But I'm really excited to be able to have him up. So right now, I'm going to bring up the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. James Riley. How are you, sir? And thank you, man, for hopping on tonight.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, James, just real quick, if you don't mind, let the people know who you are, city and state you reside, and what's kind of your family dynamic.
Absolutely. Well, I am, of course, James Riley. I'm from the wonderful state of California. So, um, live in Los Angeles. If you're familiar with Inglewood, that's where I reside. I am a proud father of 4 children. And so let me fix my camera just a hot second, make sure I can get in the frame.
No problem.
There should be right there in the middle. Okay. So proud father of 4. I have 4 boys, 1 daughter. My sons are 20. My oldest just had a birthday yesterday.
Wow.
So 20, 18, 15, and my daughter is 13. So I have a wonderful wife, and we live as best as we can here in Inglewood. We're both teachers, and so of course we're caught up with this caught in the virtual learning
Yeah.
and teaching with the due to the pandemic. So that's just a little bit about me.
Man, you got an interesting dynamic of kids' ages, and so we're gonna be able to dive into that. And being a teacher, man, I got a lot of friends who are teachers, and it's one thing to stand on your feet all day long in the classroom. It's another to spend 7, 8 hours on a Zoom. I don't care who you are, that ain't what a human is built for. But you guys
Absolutely.
are you guys are putting in some work, and so shout out to those educators, especially during the pandemic, because man, you start to realize exactly what's essential when stuff
Absolutely.
starts being taken away and a lot of different things that are taken for granted. So
Yes.
thank you for being here. Next up, I want to bring up a gentleman who, man, this guy has some unique things, and I'll bring him up as we go through the interview that I found just based on the content that he creates, the way he's able to articulate what he's after, and just there's some people who know how to say a lot with less words. He seems to be that kind of guy to me. So I'm really excited to be able to have him on tonight. And so I wanted you guys to be introduced and to get a chance to be a part of this Dynamic Father series. His name is Mr. Terrell Lindsay. How are you, sir? Unmute yourself. Uh-oh. Yep, it says you muted yourself, so you're gonna have to somewhere. We gotta mute. It says the guests muted themselves. So technical difficulties. It happens, people. It happens. Let's see. We're gonna try to get you up and running.
I was good for
now
a minute.
We there. There we go.
All right. Yeah, I have. Well, we always prepare for technical difficulties,
That's right.
It happens, people. So one, thank you for having me on, James. Wonderful to meet you, man. Looking forward to having a really good conversation here, man.
Same here. Absolutely.
My name is Terrell Lindsay. I reside, born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I have two wonderful boys, very active boys. They're 8, and the youngest will be 6 in a few days here. So I have some young whippersnappers, as you would say.
Got you. Well, listen, fellas. Tonight is an opportunity for us to kind of unpack for some, and maybe just even open up for others, just this space in which we find ourselves in as fathers. And I think that this conversation is universal. There's no, as we found out in the last conversation, I think we all are having kind of the same moments, just that we're experiencing them at different times, right? One of the interesting conversations, and we'll get into it later, that we had in the last conversation with Noble and Philip was just around, why guys don't reach out for help. Like, we're drowning in trying to figure this thing out, but yet we won't ask, right? And I'll kind of get you guys' perspective on that, but I want to kind of start the conversation with this. As a father, we are learning a lot of things in real time. There's not a blueprint to everything that you're going to deal with when it comes to your kids, right? So let me start with this, and Terrell, I'll throw the question to you first. What still scares you about being a dad?
Oh man, there's a ton. But the main thing is, I will say projection, right? And hopefully this isn't lagging. Can you guys see me? Did you lose me?
Yep.
Okay. So it's projection. And what I mean by that is I'm hoping, and I'm trying my best not to project my fears, my past struggles and traumas onto my children, right? And so that's the thing that scares me the most about being a father, right? And a Black dad at that. There's a lot of trauma that comes with us in general as a culture and as a people. So that's the big thing for me. It's projecting those and being mindful of who they are, because we're raising little human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, James? Because your kids are in such a unique spot, and they're all right there together. What is it for you? What's the thing that kind of scares you about being a dad?
When I think about it, I really want to make sure that they have the tools necessary, once they, leave my nest, if you will. I just want to make sure that they have what they need to be successful in the world. Right. And so, I guess to answer your question, them not being prepared is what scares me. And so my wife and I, we do a tremendous job just trying to make sure that they have the tools that they need. My older 2 sons are in college. And so, just making sure that they can be independent, right? Once they leave the nest, and and kind of develop some gumption, some will, some fortitude to make things happen for themselves. And so, um, I just want to make sure that they're really, really prepared once they leave the nest and become adults, because this world is crazy. And we saw that last week, right?
Yeah.
This world is crazy. And so I just want to make sure that they, once once they're 25, 30, they have what they need. I laid a nice foundation for them to make the proper decisions in life. So, just making sure that, I've poured into them as much as I can, by example, by assistance, and just doing everything I can to help them be the responsible adults that I would want them to be once they leave my house, my home.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think I had a conversation previously. We did a live with a gentleman, and one of the things that we were talking about is we kind of did a look back of 2020 and what it was like trying to be a dad through that. Right, trying to, like, the fact that there were so many conversations that, had it been our way, we would have avoided a lot of those conversations, but you couldn't, because it was right there on the phone. It was right there on the right? Like, so you couldn't avoid those things. What's it been like for you, Terrell, in navigating some of these awkward moments, right? That are right here. Like, you can't act like that moment didn't just happen in the world. How have you been navigating that? What's the communication? How do you do that thing? And what has it taught you about fathering in today's world?
Yeah. If I'm being completely transparent and honest, man, I can't say that I have. Maybe somebody outside looking in will say, we're doing a relatively good job. And it's not just me by myself. I do have support with my wife. But 2020 has definitely been a beast. I recently bought a book maybe a couple months ago that tells a story, like something happened in my town, right? And it's a story of racial inequity, right? And it gets deep into that. And it's like, I still have not brought myself to the place to where I can read that book to my sons and start having that conversation. Now, fortunately, my oldest son, because of my wife, I don't really watch much news unless it's because of her, but he watches the news with his mom. And so now he's open. You can't hide from it. Right. These conversations are there. And so it forces us to be very mindful, or forces me to be very mindful and answer the question. So what I do encourage my kids to do is ask me questions about things they don't know. And so they're very vocal, and I try to be as transparent as possible with them in terms of answering those questions. And then there are some things that it's just like, we're not ready to have that conversation yet, son. We're just really, we're really not ready. Time out. Let's take a break. So to answer your question, man, what I've done is just be in the moment, be present when the opportunity is there. Have that conversation. They'll remember it the most then, because they started it, and it'll stick with them, and you'll continue to have those conversations.
Yeah. What about you, James? How are you navigating these in your face moments? Because kids are on their phone, they're seeing the conversations. In fact, with my sons who play sports, they both play lacrosse, they both play soccer. My other one plays football. The conversations are happening in their circles, right? So there's the teenage version of the conversation, which could be whatever, right? And then there's the adult to the child, helping them, trying to figure out that piece. How are you navigating that for you, James?
I'm in a dynamic situation because, like I said, my two older sons, they're in college. And so, they kind of know and understand what's going on in terms of, the racial undertones. They understand, they're old enough. And so they really kind of have their own lens. And so, of course, I'm available to kind of, dialogue with them and discuss, if they have questions, or, even when they leave the house. Right. And so, my oldest son, he's a big dude. He's a student athlete at a, D1 university. And so he's like 6'4", 300,
Mm-hmm.
and he drives a big black car. And so, for me, I have to make sure I have those conversations in terms of, okay, listen, you know, here's where, the registration is, just in case something
Right.
happens where he's pulled over, right?
Mm-hmm.
My second oldest son, he's not driving, but still, just, having those conversations in terms of police brutality, racial injustice, and, just dialoguing. And so they're aware. And so, right now I'm glad that they kind of comprehend and understand the dynamics of what's going on in society, right?
Yeah.
Um, my third son, he's kind of not there in terms of just like asking. And we'll have these conversations, and so he's beginning to develop his own understanding, um, of what's going on. And so, for me, I just want to make sure that I'm there for support. Now, my daughter, she's into, she's walking around, into social media, and every time I see her, she's walking around with her phone. And so, for me, I just have to make sure that, as a parent, that she's, behaving responsibly,
Mm-hmm.
while using social media, because you have a lot of crazy people out there
Yes, sir.
who pedophiles and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
just the different conversations that we're having along social media, presidential elections, racial injustices, and things of that nature. So my dynamic is, it runs the gamut, right? And so I'm lucky enough to where they're open, and my wife and I, we support, and so we kind of tag team. If I don't say something, then she might say something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes um, they know which parent to go to talk about different situations,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Yeah.
right?
do. They do.
So just making sure that I'm available when they're ready to have those conversations, and offering the best knowledge that I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Uh,
wanted to mention too, Chris.
go ahead.
Didn't cut you off, but yesterday you mentioned something that was along these lines too, James. When you mentioned social media, Chris, I think you said yesterday, it's like we're living in an age where we can no longer hide things from our children, right? When I was growing up, there used to be this little brown cable box, right? And if you wanted to watch Showtime, you had to wait till everybody was
That's
going to sleep, and it had
right.
that one button. And as soon as you heard somebody coming down the stairs, you had to hurry up and you
Mm-hmm.
just turn the TV off and get caught. Now everything is so accessible, right? And so it is in our best interest, especially for me with young kids, it's in my best interest to teach them how to navigate these spaces.
Mhm.
I recently, yesterday, they were on their tablets, and we have screen time set up. So it will monitor how long they're on certain apps and things of that nature, especially with school. And so they figured out, now they're 8 and 6. They figured out how to go to screen time, change the passcode so that they can get into the games. And so I'm like, okay, how do I handle this? I'm not mad at you, son. I appreciate what you've done. And I'm going to further, like, we're going to dig deeper into that, because there's something there that could be successful for you. But the motives, we got to
Right.
figure out the motives.
Yeah.
You did that behind my back.
Yeah.
So those are opportunities too. We gotta be more open.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up. So I'll ask you guys this. Man, that's interesting. So what have your kids taught you about you as you've been fathering throughout this journey?
James, you want to go? It's up to you, but I got a ton.
Sure. I'll take a stab at it. I think they've taught me really to be patient. I there's plenty of times when I could just fly off the handle at something, especially when they were younger. And so the older kids, they kind of kid me. It's like, oh, Dad, you kind of letting up. You weren't. You were really tough with us, but for the younger two, they're like, oh, you kind of soften up. And so, I think, I've kind of made adjustments, and I've realized what my mistakes have been. And so for me, just try not to repeat, the mistakes that I did with some of my, early child rearing, because, there is no guide, there's no guide to fatherhood. You just kind of in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And things just kind of develop, and so you have to react based on the situation that you're in. And so
Yeah.
for me, I would really have to say that, I've developed patience and, I've come to understand that, especially now, these kids, they have their own perspective. And sometimes instead of just flying off the handle, you might want to listen to see what their rationale is because, why they did a certain thing. And so it just kind of makes you go, Arsenio Hall used to say that,
That's right.
things that makes you go,
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
for me, I think just developing patience is something that I've learned by rearing my kids.
Gotcha. What about you, Terrell?
Yeah, I wish I could echo that sentiment, right? I agree. I think the pandemic has a lot to do with the level of my patience at this point.
Mhm.
But I think my kids have forced me to be more introspective and reflective, right? So our kids are absolutely mirrors of us, and sometimes in not just in physical, like look like us, but also in the way that we act, our characteristics and things of that nature. But it has a lot. They forced me to kind of look at them in a way that to remember that they are not me, right? And I'm
Mhm.
just a vessel. So at every opportunity, I try to take and pay attention to who they are as they grow up, so that I can put them in the best place possible for them to be successful at whatever they were put on this earth to do. Right?
Mhm.
Has nothing to do with me. And I have to remind myself of that constantly. And they force me to me to remind myself of that as well. So I don't know what I would call that, but they have definitely forced me to be more of a vessel and to feed into them the thing that they need to be the best version of themselves when when they grow up and be grown men.
Yeah. I would say for me, so my dynamic is I have a blended family, so I inherited my boys, and what I have figured out so far about me
Mm-hmm.
is that um, it's not so much about patience as much as it is um, being being present with some empathy, even
Mm,
though they're sons, right?
mm,
So like they are living in a world that was digital native from the moment they came out the womb, right?
mm-hmm.
They're living in a world where everything is fast. They're living in a world where, conversations go and come and die quickly and whatever. They're living in a world of memes, which is suggestive. They're living in a world where, you know, as an adult, I might want to fly off the handle and, as I mentioned the other day, blow my gasket behind something that I see.
Mm-hmm.
And to them, they're like, that doesn't move us. And I'm like,
You're right.
but she sent that. And they don't really care. Right? They're not, it's not that big of a deal to them. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm having to figure out is, what I'm learning about myself is, there are things that are big deals to me, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
1980s brain. This is
Yep.
2021, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes I realize there's a gap between the way I was raised and what the way we need to raise them today. That's okay, but I can't try to force 1980 on today. It's not gonna work. And I end up pushing my boys away from me, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is the last thing you want. So I'm just
Right.
learning those different things. So here's something I thought about with you guys. Anybody want to respond to that, by the way?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you, how do you bridge that gap though? Right? How have you found a way to bridge that gap between 1980 and 2020? Right? Because what also comes with that is wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You being in this world and on this planet, when the moment you hit the ground, you've learned a number of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Son, don't go down that alley. Ain't
Yeah.
nothing good for you. Don't mess with that girl over there. She
Yeah.
might look everything that glitters ain't gold, boy.
Right.
Chill out.
Right.
So how have you found a way to bridge that gap so you don't lose your sons in that, right? In that way, and keep them coming to you when they need to the most.
I'm still learning that. I don't have the
Fair.
answer yet.
Fair.
I will say the first thing I have done is be disciplined myself. So
Mm,
if I'm trying to teach them discipline, so for example, I was 248 pounds. I didn't like it. I decided I'm getting ready to drop this weight. I dropped 65 pounds. I took my boys with me to workouts. They saw me say no at the table, right? And every time they ask me, because they're like, this is your favorite. I'm like, nah, I told y'all I was committed. So I'm not doing it, right?
Yeah.
I don't care where we at, out of town, out of country. Not touching it. They're like, for real? Yeah, I told y'all what I was doing. Because I want them to realize like discipline it's for real. It can be in anything that you want. The only way I know how to do that is demonstrate that in front of them so that when I mention discipline, they've got an example. They know I'm not just talking about it. I've actually shown you what discipline looks like. I'm not talking to you about how to treat a girl. They see how I treat my wife, right?
Yeah.
They see what I teach them to do in public, in private, right? They see that's right. So right now, that's my answer. There's so many other things right now that I just don't know how to, I don't know how to navigate that yet because I'm still figuring me out as we are growing and figuring out one of the interesting things is they're 15 and 16. It's that time for them to what I call practice their independence. A little bit. Every now and then they do something that's really stupid. we gotta reel them in, right? But I understand it, right? Like they feel like they a little bit older now, so they shouldn't have to have certain restrictions. Cool. What I talk to them about is if you want less restrictions, I gotta have more trust. It's even trade, right? So it's been kind of those things, and I had to learn that it's more about conversation so that they understand the why behind the reason I might be so rigid, as opposed to saying no without any context, right?
Yeah.
Like my kids still deserve context. I'm learning that. Like they need them asking why is not to be antagonizing to me or to be disrespectful. They really be like, why? Like an open why. It's not like a bad thing. And I had to learn that, like, oh, my kids really are asking, right? Not to just dismiss them in the moment. So those are like, I'm literally learning those things real time with my boys right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's the difference. James, you got girls, right?
Well, yeah, I have one daughter.
Is that different with a girl?
I mean, I think of her as not my own as of yet. She's still a mama's girl.
Okay.
And so,
okay, gotcha.
But we still, play around horseplay. And, so I'm just waiting, because, from, my friends tell me, okay, well, she's a mama's girl now, but, in high school, there's going to be a split, right, between mama and so, I'm just kind of waiting my turn to see what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I just want to make sure with all my kids that I have a great relationship so that they can come to me, with something when it goes down, right? I don't want to be the last person to find out. I don't want you to go through grandma and uncle and cousin, and then, oh, what? I'm just now finding out.
Right.
Yeah.
Really? So, let me in the conversation in the beginning. I don't want to have to find out way, playing that telephone game, you know what I'm saying? And what happens, things get messed up, misaligned, and, misinformation. So for me, with my daughter, I'm just trying to make sure that, we have a positive, and that's what all my children, from my 20-year-old all the way to my 13-year-old, because it's important. Because these kids, especially in today's society, they're going to need someone who's trustworthy, that they can go to when situations come up. So I'm just trying to be that even keeled dad, so when that time does happen, I won't have to blow a gasket.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, true enough, I might be hurt inside,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure that they feel comfortable with approaching me and coming to me and talking to me when something happens.
Gotcha.
Because something will happen. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So whether they go to mom or me, I just need to make sure that I'm available, so that I can kind of give counsel and give information so that it'll help them.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this. Being that our wives have been best blessing to give us our children. How has your wife helped shape the way you father today?
Oh, oh. Um, eh, I guess I could say for one, my wife is at the very least, she does a lot of things, but I think she keeps me honest when it comes to being a father, right? Because a lot of times we can have these ideas in our head. So I grew up in a single parent household. Um, so representation, I had uncles that were around, and I got representations of what men should be and fathers should be, good and bad. But um, you know, now that I'm gonna grown, it's like I can have these conversations with my wife about what I want to be and how I want to be a father and being this great dad. And she keeps me honest about it, right? So I can say one thing and then my actions say another. And so she's helped kind of keep me on that even playing field. And sometimes we all kind of need that extra nudge, like, yeah, yesterday you said this, but today you're doing a certain thing, right? And somebody said something to me that was powerful. It's like, as parents, we all kind of parent from our trauma, and sometimes we don't know it, right? So some of the
Wow.
things that I went through in my past and in my childhood, that I may have not properly have dealt with comes out in the way that I raise my kids.
Yeah.
And so having that additional person in the house that recognizes something that doesn't sit right, and they can have a conversation with you about what that thing and how they felt about what you did or what you said, allows you to begin to adjust. And that's all we're doing as parents, man. We don't get it right in the moment all the time, but it's very important for us, I believe, to be able to adjust and make a change when that happens, right? And recognize that we're not perfect people, and fix those things and as we go along.
Yeah. How about you, James?
Yeah, my wife, she's wonderful, wonderful support. Um, and here's the funny thing, or here's the thing about our dynamic. She was raised in a two-parent home. I was, raised in a single parent home. And so of course, once we started having children, things act and look differently, for both me and her, right? So um, you know, when I had to discipline, she would, kind of make sure that I wasn't going, I wasn't blowing the gasket like we talked about a few moments ago, right? But she realized that, okay, something needed to be done, right? And so, she's just always there, advising me, and even, a lot of times she'll play like the bad cop, right? And so,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, she'll and even to this day, she's like, oh, I'm the mini mommy, right? And you're always, I'm like, no, because there is times when I have to be, the mean person, and then she'll be the softie, right? So we just kind of have to, you know, play on those different dynamics. Um, we're talking about, sharing, right? And so one of the things is, well, dad doesn't like to share because, he was reared in a single parent home, whereas she was like, okay, hey, this is everybody, you can come get whatever. And I'm like, no, this is mine, right? And so even sharing like simple things like body wash, right? If one of the kids run out and they want to use mine, I'm like, hey, they need to ask.
All right.
you
Right.
know?
Facts.
And so yeah, so it's like, this is mine. And she's like, hey, we're the adults, we're the parents, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they just don't speak up. And so I mean, even those are kind of crazy situations, but I mean, man, my wife is my rock. And we make sure that if one is going in on a child or explaining, we're kind of there to make sure that everything is okay, that the child has someone to listen to and even ask questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it'd be crazy if both of us are going off at the same time.
Yeah.
So someone has to kind of balance out the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we both can't be mean at the same time. We can be probably stern, but we both can't fly off the handle and escalate things to the 10th degree. So
Yeah.
someone has to be that calm head. And so we kind of play off of that. If I'm gonna be the hard head, parent, or the real stern and then maybe my children will go to her and talk. If she's being the tough guy, then they can come to me. So we kind of play off that, and it's been working for us, right? We feel that our children are responsible. And again, once they leave our house, we want them to kind of understand their duties as an adult, to be responsible, to make sure you do what's necessary to progress in life. And this is where they look at it. This is where they learn, from those mistakes, from those examples. And so we're just trying to give them that firm foundation. So once they leave Riley World, hey, they can be successful out there in the real world. So.
It's interesting you brought that up, because I heard it explained one time. Oddly enough, my wife was at a women's conference, and she came back and she gave me this analogy that was told, and I was like, that's it. That's how we should be as husband and wife. And the lady happened to give this analogy. She said, listen, if two people are in a kayak and you're trying to go forward, there's no version of that where you both can be on the same side at one time. You're going to go in a circle. She said, you also cannot be not working together, because guess what? Somebody we putting in a whole lot of energy, the other person might be just chilling. She
Absolutely.
said there's actually a real thing of balance no matter what the situation is. So to your point, if I got to come in and be Mr. Disciplinarian, mama probably not going to handle it, because she's like, he got it.
Yeah.
Like, he got it, right? If she's going to be disciplinarian, I can't come in there and come behind her. She ain't throwing me the alley-oop so I can slam dunk it. That's not what we're doing. We can't do that. Somebody's got to back down, because, and it was dope the way this lady explained it. She said, you got to understand, if you're going forward in a kayak, there's one on one side, one on the other, and there's a whole lot of communication. And here's the thing, both of y'all are looking forward, which means the person at the front of the boat is paying attention to where we're headed. The person behind is helping them navigate. Hey, we got this coming up. Yo, you moving too hard. Hey, let's flip sides, right? That's what it's like being husband and wife. It's that piece of like, what role am I playing right now? and play my position, right? Like, you can't be point guard and center. It's not gonna happen. Right. I like sports, so I love basketball. So excuse me, but you can't do that, right? It's impossible. So Terrell, what you got today?
Yeah, I guess you could kind of see me moving around, because it's interesting you bring that up, man. The reason I'm moving around and I'm laughing and making these facial expressions is because it resonates with me so much. My wife and I last year celebrated our 10-year anniversary.
Congrats.
And thank you. And we went on vacation. And one of the things we did was we got in a kayak. Right. And we always have this conversation about how well we would do on The Amazing Race. Right.
Oh, God.
That is my idea of what, relationship looks like being able to communicate in a way where you can achieve success at a particular task.
Yeah.
And so we're in the kayak, and I'm in the front, she's in the back, and I'm supposed to be leading. She's expecting me to lead. And so my actions are saying one thing, but I'm quiet. I'm not telling her, hey, I'm going to go left, so I need for you to paddle on the right, right? And so she got frustrated with me in the back because she wasn't getting the instructions. And so she just stopped pedaling. And guess what? She stopped paddling, and the kayak go one way, and we arguing. And we're not arguing, we debating, and I'll just get out the kayak, and I'm like, I'm done with it. But it is absolutely a metaphor for that relationship if you think about it, right? So that's why it was resonating with me, because I actually went through that experience.
Yeah, and I will tell you, it's funny because those types of, like, seriously, fellas, if you've never been in a kayak with your wife, go do it. Yeah. If you got a girlfriend, both of y'all go get in the kayak and let's go see what's going to happen. Because that's going to tell you how y'all going to handle every situation. You got to communicate. You can't just, and I'm learning that a lot. Like, I learn that almost every single day. It's like the thing I always been telling myself over the last year is like, get out of your head and say something.
Yeah.
Get out of your head. Yeah. She don't know.
Yeah.
Don't assume she just understands. She doesn't.
Right.
Neither does either way, right?
Right.
I don't
Right.
know, honey. I had no idea. I just came from out downstairs in the office. I didn't know the world was on fire up here. I
Right.
had no
Yeah.
idea, right? And that's been, and, you know, that whole thing. And it's funny because I actually did a dragon boat race one time. They have it out here in my area, and it's like a huge, big deal. And that taught me a lot about the principle of relationships. So let me ask you guys this: you have your relationship with your wife, and you're building that relationship. You have your relationship with your kids. Where are you going to get what you need to help you navigate both worlds and having a job and the pressures of the world? And where are you going? What are you doing? Do you even have an outlet?
So I guess I'll tackle it first.
Mhm.
So I'm a man of faith, right? And so of course, you know, my response is going to be to God, and you know, the Holy Spirit, right, helping me
Facts.
navigate some things, right? But you know, I have to rely also on the things that I've seen as a young boy. And so, like I said, you know, I was reared in a single parent home by my mom, and you know, when I got married, I wanted to make sure that my home was that I was going to be with my children, with my wife for the duration. And so for me, you know, looking at models at my, you know, at church, you know, amongst the older men, you know, I was just like, okay, he has a good relationship with his family, you know. And so for me, I just had those models growing up. And even now, you know, I'm seeking out people in my church, not necessarily seeking out in terms of asking questions or asking them questions and having that relation, you know, but I'm using my eyes and I'm hearing about just the legacy that some of these men that I interact with are having with their children. And then, you know, there's a close knit a friendship that I have of guys, you know, that I hang out with. Now, we've never really had any conversations about fatherhood, but for me, you know, I just have to know that, okay, if I needed to have a conversation, I could have it with, you know, this person or that person. And so, you know, for me, I really rely on my past. And so, yeah, you know, sometimes I might need an outlet, you know. So if I need an outlet just to think some things through, you know, I'll hop on my bicycle. You know, I like to, you know, I'll call myself a baby cyclist, right? And so I have a road bike, and I'll hop on that mug just so I can get away and clear my head.
Yeah.
Um, I come in this particular room here where I do a lot of my live streaming and tinkering around with the computer, and you know, the kids are saying, "Daddy, you spend a lot of time in there." Well, okay, yeah, we're in COVID. I mean,
Right.
I'm at home, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's also books and stuff.
Right.
But for me, you know, if I need to recharge, you know, I can talk to one or two friends. I'm looking at the past relationship of some of the guys around the church. And, you know, if I need to get away just to clear my head. And then of course, you know, when I take vacation with my wife, that's another opportunity to kind of connect as well, because we're not necessarily parenting.
Yep.
We're just in our own bubble, in our own space, having fun, kayaking, like you said. We had that experience as well. And so for me, you know, I kind of think that's how I handle, you know, trying to get out of, you know, overthinking it, is, if you will. And so, you know, having a set amount of guys that I talk to, relying on the people that I've seen in my church, and just trying to make some time for myself is kind of how I deal with, you know, getting in my own headspace and figuring things out.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, T?
Um, so notoriously, I think men just kind of consider themselves an island, right? We just kind of operate in a vacuum, man. It's like, okay, we going through this. Let me
Yeah.
huddle up with myself and figure these things out and knuckle it up, right? So one of the things that I recognize that's one of the things that I absolutely need to be better at, right? Whether it means going to talking with a third party and having some conversation that's non-biased, and doing that. But right now, kind of the things that I do is I have conversations on my podcast. My podcast is about fathers and fatherhood. So I
talk about that. Tell the people, please.
Yeah. So shameless plug. I founded a podcast called the Awesome Black Dad Show, and it's an opportunity for to share stories about Black fathers specifically, right, and give us an opportunity to have these conversations that we don't necessarily have. Sometimes we operate in a space where we think we're the only ones going through it, but I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations and someone will reach out, a guy will reach out and be like, man, I'm glad y'all had that conversation because I've been dealing with this thing and I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't know who to talk to.
Right.
And I'm glad you had that conversation. So the podcast has helped me alleviate some of the pressure around me in terms of being better and improving myself, right? And encouraging other people, other dads to do the same. So that's been one way, but I definitely got to do a better job of it here in 2021, right? Whether that's spiritually, going to the Bible and being there and tapping more into that, and then finding mentors, because I think that's important as well, right? Mm-hmm. Finding somebody that you can trust that has some wisdom that you can reach out to and be like, hey, man, I'm going through this thing and I have no idea what path to take, man. And I need some, I need some advice.
Yeah. For me, my outlets are this office, video games. Sometimes I play it even with my kids because I can connect with them in that space. Yeah. Because they can't beat me yet in NBA 2K. Sometimes books. My biggest therapeutic thing though is washing my car. I go outside and I can wash my cars forever and I'm good. I don't need anybody. I don't ask for help because I don't want any help. I just want to be outside, right? Just do my thing.
Absolutely.
And I've learned that for my wife's therapy is hiking. I hate hiking, but she loves it. But my wife could literally go hiking and don't need nobody else. Nope, I'm good. I'm out. Right.
Right.
And for me, what I figure, what's crazy is, I grew up old school. So, I'm used to, I grew up in the hood, old school box Chevys that just had the great music and people just ride for hours and don't say a word. I'm still that guy. I will get in my car and have the music on what in the world. And I'm actually in a zone. I'm good. I don't have to talk but it helps me think. I'm in there processing a bunch of stuff. And then when I get done, my wife is like, you literally sat there and thought of all of that. And I'm like, yeah, figured all that out. Yeah. But those are my outlets. And then I think the other thing has been, I got more intentional towards the summer, especially, of just communicating more with my wife in a vulnerable space. I got this thing that I always tell her that she'll bring a question to my attention and I'm like, honey, I'm in the boardroom with God about that. So give me a minute. And because sometimes I'm a processor, right? I don't react to stuff. So it might take me a minute before I bring something up. And for my wife, it's frustrating because she's like, honey, that was 2 weeks ago. But I'm like, but babe, now I can, I know how to articulate myself. I couldn't articulate myself in that moment. Right.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll get in the boardroom with God about certain stuff and then it'll finally click to me. And I'm like, that's actually what I want. Or that's why I felt the way I did. Or that's why I didn't like that. Okay. Now I know. Right. Now I know how to do certain things or how to handle that particular situation going forward. And so, for me, every Sunday we get together and because we're not going to church physically anymore. Every Sunday morning, 9:30, we're in front of our TV watching our church. And that's important to me. And it just gives me those other spaces where I'm not in front of a camera. I'm not at work doing a long training, which can be 8 hours. I'm not, I'm just being me, right? And authentically myself and happy about it, right? Not feeling guilty because you got an outlet. Not feeling guilty because I'm taking this 2-hour break when I should be doing something else. It's like, no, you too are important, just as important as all the other stuff that you got to get done.
Hey, Chris, I got a question for you just as a follow-up. how do you not get stuck in the boardroom with God? Because I'm a
Mm.
processor too,
Yeah.
and my problem, the thing that I work on, I am overly analytical. It's just my nature.
Yeah.
And I just get bogged down, and then I get analysis paralysis.
Hmm.
So what? And I imagine you get there too, right? If you're in the boardroom with God, you sitting back kicking it, you got a cup of coffee with your feet up, and you
Yeah.
chilling, talking about whatever. How do you not get stuck?
There's two things that counseling taught me about making decisions as a man.
Mm.
One, whatever the situation is, no matter how weird or how screwed up or whatever the problem is, my wife and my kids deserve an answer. Period. I have to go by that. The other is create time frames on giving a response. Kind of like we have deadlines for getting some work done at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I literally will come to my wife and say, babe, right now I don't have an answer, but give me 2 days, and I promise I'll revisit.
Mm-hmm.
That keeps me from over analyzing. Or what happens with me is when I feel overwhelmed, like I got a lot of stuff on my brain, I short circuit and I do nothing, which is even worse than actually doing something, right? So
Indecision.
Yeah, indecision, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I have to go by, those two grounded principles, and I learned that in counseling. Like,
Okay.
you gotta acknowledge that something needs to be done, right? You can't just walk away and go left. Yeah, that ain't gonna help nobody.
good.
You know what I mean? But the second thing is,
Take
you
it
gotta
next.
put a deadline. You gotta be willing to say, look, babe, give me a day or give me by the evening, and I
Sure.
promise I'll come back, right? Whether that means I'm coming back to process it out loud with you, which might sound all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm coming back saying, no, babe, I promise you I'll have something for you by the time we go to bed.
Yeah.
But if I create those time blocks, then it forces me to have to
Think about it.
You can't just,
Yeah.
because everybody else is waiting on you, right?
Yep.
Everybody else is waiting on you, whether you like it or not. They're all sitting there going, come on, brother. Like, what are we doing? So those two principles help me not get into analysis paralysis.
Okay. Great
And
advice.
I do that in business. I do that in business too. Like, I can't just sit around and just, let me think about it. I give people deadlines. And the way to hold me accountable is I ask for deadlines too. Like, so I'll ask you, like, hey, when do you need this by?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Then I know my limit, right? Like, okay, then I only got 24 hours to figure this out. Cool.
Yeah.
Keeps me moving. So here's something. As your kids have gotten older, right? Now, Terrell, you have younger ones, so you probably haven't reached this space yet, but I think this is probably coming.
Here we come.
Yeah,
me-
James, for you,
Let me get my notebook.
James, for you, like you got older kids now, right?
Yeah.
How are you gaining their trust at this point? Because it's one thing in your house, is your world. It's another thing as they're getting older and starting to spend more time away from the house and more time in
Right.
their own circles and more time doing their own thing and making their own decisions, but they're still circling, back to you, which means now the dynamic of your relationship as they've gotten older has changed a bit, right?
Sure.
How are you gaining their trust now that they're young adults? Because that's a different gain in my trust than when they're 5 and 6, right?
Right.
That's a
Right.
totally different space of trust. How are you handling that?
Well, like I said, the older two, they're college students. And so, they're out, at their universities. They both attend different colleges out of state, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, if there's a situation where, they kind of need me, or, maybe I'll give advice and I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't, do this because it might have the, X, Y, and Z might happen, right? Or if you do this, X, Y, and Z might happen and it might be a good thing. And so for me, I just have to make sure that, I give good counsel, and depending on the outcome of the situation, they'll either say, oh, Dad, you know what? you you were right. I probably shouldn't have done that thing, right? Or they'll say, Dad, you know what? That was a good decision because I was able to do X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
And so, again, being able to give good wisdom, good information, and simply if I don't know, then I think sometimes we have to say, "Hey, son, I don't know,"
Man,
and
what you saying?
you know, yeah, I mean, we have to be, and there's been certain situations where I don't have the answer,
Hmm.
and so the only thing I can say, son, is again, let me think about it, or let me pray, or let me talk to somebody who might have had a similar experience, and they'll be like, "Okay, Dad," right? And so for me, I think again, giving wise counsel to their needs. They're out in their separate, um, doing their own separate thing in their dorms on their college campuses, and so, we just have to make sure that whatever information we give them, they're making smart and wise decisions. And if they come to us with a certain need, again, just being able to say, "Dad" or "Son, I know," or
Hmm.
"I don't know," and getting the proper information to them. Now, my younger two, I'm still trying to, I think I think I've developed their trust, 15 and 13. And so that's still uh being worked on. They're still at a vulnerable point in their lives.
Hmm.
And so again, just checking in with them, seeing how they're doing, especially now with the social emotional whole situation with this pandemic, just being
Yeah,
able to
man.
check in with them, right?
Yeah.
And playing around with them, and talking, and like you said, sitting down and playing a game. I sat down with my oldest son a couple of weeks ago. He's like, Dad, come play this game with me. I'm like, I ain't want to play no game, right? And he was like, Dad, I downloaded this game for you so we can play. And I'm like, okay. And so for me, doing that simple action is a way that I'm gaining trust,
Hmm.
right? Even though it's a video game, right? And I've never played a video game with him. It's been a very long time, but
Hmm.
just doing something like that, it's not going to hurt me, right?
Right.
Because all I was going to do is just probably come in this room and sit and tinker around with my iPad or my computer or whatever,
Right.
right? So, I'm still developing trust with my younger two, and I think my older two, we've kind of got into a groove where they'll listen, and I kind of put the ball in their court. It's like, okay, here's your options. If you want this outcome, do this. If you want this outcome, don't do that, right?
Hmm.
So, again, just giving wise counsel, and hopefully they'll make the wise decision based on what I say. And that's one way that they can garner or continue to develop their trust in me as a parent and as
Yeah.
a father.
And it's interesting that you say that because, I think there's one thing about, it's not only just the gaining their trust, but them staying open to be vulnerable with you as they mature.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because I think a lot of times we end up in situations where, I like the way you put it, Jason. It's like, I don't want to be the last person to know. Like, I had you. I should be the first person, you know,
Absolutely.
and that doesn't always happen. And I understand for whatever reason. Right. Um, but I think there's that thing of like, I think most parents are basically always trying to communicate, please stay vulnerable with me no matter how old you get. Right? Like please at least let me in enough to know that like you still got a soft spot with me where we can just, just crack open whatever's happening and work together. Yeah, go ahead, T.
Yeah, I'm. You know what I'm learning. And Mr. Riley, definitely thank you for those nuggets, man. I'm definitely writing those things down. Um,
Absolutely. You're welcome.
what I'm definitely learning, man, about myself, and I guess you could say my kids are teaching me as well, is that I can't be everything to my kids.
Yeah, man.
Um, and so even when we talk about vulnerability and them being vulnerable, we also have to be vulnerable, right? And I have to, even though I feel like I have this wealth of knowledge that I can give to them to help them be better versions of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I have to understand that I'm not going to be able to give them everything, and I have to be if I'm conscious of that, that means that I need to be able to put them in spaces where they can find somebody that can help them, right? I think ideally at the end of the day, it isn't so much, and again, this is me. I got young kids, so I haven't reached the pinnacle, so it absolutely probably will change. But I think it's for me, even though it may be a hit to my ego that they didn't come to me first, I would much rather they go to somebody that I trust to give them solid information about making a decision,
Facts.
as opposed to like not saying anything to anybody or being mad that they didn't come to me.
Yeah.
Right. I hope to build that relationship with my boys where they feel comfortable enough to come to me about anything, and I can direct them if I don't know. To James's point, like, I don't know that, here's somebody you can talk to.
Yep.
But I think it's also important for me to create a network of friends and family to bring around my children so they know who they can trust if they can't trust me. Not trust is the wrong word, but if they feel like they can't get it from me and they don't know how I'll react, they can get it from somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's actually dope because at the end of the day, that's what you end up doing it for anyway. You hope that, your friend John, who you met through the kids playing football, all right, something happened with your son. He went to him. Well, thank you. As somebody, at least I know and I trust that information John is gonna handle the right way, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I totally agree with that, man. And I think it's important. Here's something I'm curious about. Both of you mentioned your upbringing. Terrell, I'll start with you. How has your upbringing impacted the way you look at not only being the everyday dad you have to be, but also the job of the relationship and responsibility that you have with your wife? Because I will say, for me, just to give you some context of the question, I grew up with 6 boys and no girls in the house. I grew up not knowing my father. I grew up meeting him twice in my life. I grew up not knowing him, though. I grew up listening to stories that weren't good because he was abusive, because everybody knew he was a drunk, because he was just falling apart. And I grew up as the youngest of 6. I grew up with a mother who worked 9 to 5, 6 to 11. So by the time I got, 20s, it's like, oh, okay. So there's this whole world out here of stuff that I'm now doing. But for the whole time, I kind of grew up fast because it was like I had 6 people in front of me to watch how not to do something.
Right.
And that was helpful. But also I had to grow up fast because mom was just doing what she could to make ends meet. Right.
Right.
But what it did was, there's some jaded parts of me while trying to raise my kids.
Yeah.
And they show up, right? And there's some areas of, because I didn't have a sister, I didn't have that favorite aunt, that now being a married man, I'm having to remember and learn real time, like, wait a second, brother, what the player stuff y'all thought y'all knew about women don't work in a marriage. So you on a whole nother scale over here on this game, right?
Yeah.
All of that is working within my relationship with my kids and with my wife. And it's like every day I'm learning something like, oh, you know what? That was a lie what my uncles used to say. They used to say that, but obviously they had damaged relationships, right?
Yeah.
They used to think that was cool. I'm in it now. That's not cool, right? Like, I wouldn't want to treat my wife like that. I don't want, you know what I mean? So there's so many different things that I'm learning, and I'm like, man, that is terrible thinking. Like, but it was what I grew up with, right? I thought, okay, if that's what they're saying, then that's what it is. And I quickly learned, no, that don't work. Not if you're trying to do something for real, right? Not if you're trying to be, to James's point, not if you're trying to be the only man this woman marries. Not if you're trying to be the only, right? Like, some of that stuff just don't work. How is your past impacting that, both dynamics of the father of you and the husband of you? You start.
Oh man, That is definitely a loaded question, bro. And in short, it's tremendously, right? And a bit of the long version of that is a number of ways to kind of attack that. But as we get older, you learn that your old normal is not normal.
How about
the stuff
that? Jesus
you know
Christ,
what I mean?
man.
As you grow up, you know what I mean? The amount of freedom that you had because your mom had to work 2 jobs to support a family, right, is not necessarily normal. She did exactly what she had to do to support that family, but it left you and the kids vulnerable to make some decisions as adults. That isn't normal, and that isn't necessarily how you should lead your life.
Man.
And so as we grow and we decide to get married and we make these choices. As a man, I made a choice to ask my wife to marry me. As a man, I made a choice to have kids with her. And so those are now my responsibility, and I'm accountable for them in a way that not that I'm just present or I'm a protector, but also in a way that I have to deal with the things that in my past that if I was single, I wouldn't have to deal with, and I could just be by myself. Right. And so I have to look back and stop blaming people for things that I didn't get then and decide who and what I want to be now. Mm-hmm. Right. And to say that sounds really easy to say,
hard,
but it's really, really hard to do in real time. Right. When you have to, when you kind of have to look at those demons, so to speak. Right. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's looking in the mirror and looking at yourself and saying, this is me making a decision and it was bad and I have to change it. Or it could be a function of, right, building a relationship with the father that was absent at that time, mm-hmm. which is kind of where I am, right? It's like my father wasn't around during my growing pains, right? One of the things when I was growing up, when I got into that puberty stage, it was like I just wanted a man in my life that could step in and be like, tell my mother, leave him alone. He's going through some things. He'll come out of it.
Right.
Don't push. Just somebody to balance that out for me. And I held that over him for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then it impacted who I was going to be. So the bar, what I would do very, very early on is I set a bar for myself in terms of like what type of dad I wanted to be. And it really wasn't a high bar. It was just like, I'm going to be present, right? Because my dad wasn't present. All I needed to do to be better was be there. That's not enough. Mm-hmm. It's not on the surface. It's not enough. Your kids want you to be present, right? And that's really what they want. But if you want to have an impact on their lives where they look back and they have a relationship with you, I think that there's going to be more there, and it develops and it grows in that way. And so I'm not going to keep taking up all this time, man, talking. I really want to hear what James got to say, man, but it's a dope question for sure.
Yo, man, give that brother a round of applause over here. Jesus Christ, man. Good Lord. Yeah, man. You know, because... And it's crazy because, I mean, those gaps that you talked about, right? Yeah. Here's the scary part about those gaps. And then James, man, please chime in. The scary part about those gaps is there's no red light sign going, you're about to run up on a gap. Nope. It happens. And in the moment you like, oh, that's 16 years of not knowing. Now it just showed up today, right? And here we are, mm-hmm. years, later, right? That imbalance of a household now is starting to show up, right? My mm-hmm. version of selfishness is because I am the youngest of 6 boys who had to survive and fight for everything. Mm-hmm. Today it shows up like selfishness, though, mm-hmm. right? And it's like, brother, you can't be that way with everything. I'm like James, like, no, brother, you don't come in my office. You get your own stuff, right? Don't just come down here. No, brother. It's away from the other side of the house for a reason. Like, you got to go through a couple steps to get over here. But I realized they're your kids, though. They don't care if you was the president of the United States. If they saw a pen on your desk, guess what they gonna do? Pick it up and walk back to the room and go do what they want to do, because they, in their mind, they should be free to do that. Right? Mm-hmm. I can't take it as a shot against my little domain over here, brother. That's back when you were 12 and 13.
Yeah.
Right? And those are the types of things that have been crazy to discover. Crazy to discover.
Crazy. I want to, before you get into your spiel, before I forget, because my mind is going. But a book I want to recommend to the audience, to the listeners,
Please.
is there's a book called Unlearn by the Humble Poet, right?
Huh.
And the premise of the book is based on the things that we were taught when we were younger, some of what we talked about today, that when we were younger, we are going to, as adults, have to unlearn those things, because the reason and the ways that we were taught those things don't exist anymore. So as an example, cavemen taught their sons that you might want to be inside the cave before sun hits a certain level, because then the wild animals are out. You're no longer teaching your kids, as an example, we can get into some other things,
Right.
but hopefully, you no longer are teaching your kids that, right? Because we don't have to worry about saber-tooth tigers, right? And so there's some things that we have to evaluate in our lives that we were taught that are outdated,
Right.
that we don't do, right? And so we begin to, that then pours into our kids, and we teach them outdated principles, and the cycle continues.
How about that, man? James, it's all you, brother. Talk to us, please.
Woo. Well, I think for me, being present, as I said earlier, being raised by my mom, I knew of my dad. He wasn't around that often. But I just have a few instances where he came, to our home, and it wasn't good. My man tried to bust a window just to get in, right? And so even though mom didn't, tell me about the situation, I can put two and two together, right? And so again, that kind of started the process in my mind in terms of what a dad should be, and kind of set the course and the framework for what not to do as a dad. And so once being present is very, very important. And so I try to stay, well, not try, I am very present, in so much as, I would give a lot of my time to some of their interests to make sure that they have what they needed. Right. And so, sports is a big thing in our household. Right. And so I wanted to make sure that I was present in my son's activities and things of that nature. I pushed them to play, football, basketball, baseball, whatever. Some of them they liked, and so some of them they didn't. And those the activities that they did like, they kind of gravitated to football. And so, for me, I consider myself a football dad, right? And so as my kids kind of matriculated and grew up, Dad, I want to play. Okay, well, let's put you in this league. I didn't play too many athletics in high school, right? I was a skinny. I was one of the cool kids, right? And so, for me, talking about being present, I just made sure that they had whatever they need. And for me, that's what dads are supposed to do, right? That's what families are supposed to do. Be there for their children. So as they matriculated high school, joining the football organization, that was going to allow me to see, my sons participate in sports, but also it was showing them that I am concerned about their, how well they do. Because sports is a good gateway into developing, brotherhood, bonds, responsibility, things of that nature. So, I've always worked to reflect on, again, like I said, a few moments ago, those that have gone before me amongst my circle of influence, my church family and things of that nature. And so, just developing a sense of responsibility, knowing that I am the provider, right? I am the leader of this household. And, I had to sometimes I had to make sure, that the kids knew that as well. It's like, look, I'm the man of this house. This is my house.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's always, just being present for them, providing everything that they need. And, along with my wife, in cahoots with my wife, right? Just making sure, one of the guys, and I guess this is one reason why I'm saying this so much lately, was doing Vlogmas with you and a whole bunch of others in our Facebook group, right? And one of the guys, he was a singer, and every morning he would say on his vlog that use the tools that God gave you to make it a better place, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that is like really stuck in my mind. And so, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking that, God has given me some tools
Yeah.
to really foster and nurture to make this world a better place. And so I would be remiss if I didn't do or live up to my responsibility as being a father, as being a husband, if I didn't do everything possible to put them in a better situation than me. Don't want them to be, you know, uh, in I don't want them to fall back and not have the a similar experience with their children. I want them I want them to be fathers to one woman, if it's possible. Now, I know situations happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I want you to be responsible. Make sure this is the person that you're gonna live with, who is you're gonna call to be your wife. And then once you're in that bond, if you have kids, you got to know how to be a father. And so the things that they have witnessed and experienced with me, hopefully they have they're going to carry those things with them into their family, and then just kind of continue to hand down things. And so, I've really relied upon my past experiences, what I shouldn't do as a father, and what I should do as a father, to be connected, to be present, to provide everything. And then ultimately going back to the biblical model, you know, I'm that parent, and I am the leader of the family. And so for all intents and purposes, it's going to be my fault that, something, you know, something didn't go the way they should. Oh, the dad didn't do this or the family didn't do that. No, I'm trying to raise boys who are aware, who are conscious, who are responsible, who are loving, based on my traditions, things that I've seen, that I've witnessed. I've had conversations with people. And so, I can go on and on. So just stop me. But those are the things that I have kind of that has helped me be the father that, and I'm not the perfect father. Trust me, I've made a whole bunch of mistakes and probably
Mm-hmm.
will make a couple more mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have all the answers. I have some answers, and the answers that I don't have, I know that I put people in the my sons know people within our circle. If they can't come to me, then they know they can come to this particular uncle or this particular family friend who's like an uncle figure, or
Mm-hmm.
it can be an auntie as well. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you get some positive information that's going to help you do what you need to do, then I've done my job. But we'll never really end doing our job until the day we die, right?
That's true. That's
We're
true.
we're going to be a father, from the time they were born until the time that we pass away, or maybe they might precede us in death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we just have to fill in those dots, the born and death, right? I've heard this several times at funerals and churches. What are we going to do? What kind of legacy are we going to help them live up to? Um, so I think somewhere in there, Chris, I kind of answered the
No,
question.
no, it's actually good because it leads me to the next thing I was thinking about, which is, we're all raising kids, and we doing the best we can with the information that we have, with the resources and
Yeah.
tools that's available. All right, like if you go to bed at night, that's all you know is I am doing the best I can with what I know. Right. What are you looking forward to as your kids age out of the home and going, like, what's the thing you're looking forward to about their future? Like, what is that one thing? I know for me, it's not just my sons getting it, but it's more about them truly being real mature men, handling their responsibilities. Like I cannot wait to see their full maturity, right? Like to see them living in that space and managing life according to, you know, to a code that I've given them, right? It saddens me to see young men who who are struggling, not because they're just trying to figure out life, but because they're not really, they don't have a compass, right? They're just kind of, squirrel, right? They're just everywhere and nowhere at the same time, right? They don't have a compass that they're living their life by. And I want my boys, when they are 20, 25 and 27 and 30, I want them to I want them to know that if everything broke down, they got a compass to follow, right? And I at least know I got that, right? That's kind of my thing. Like I'm looking forward to that maturity. I'm looking forward to them having their own kids, their own family, and bringing them over to the house and seeing how they handle, their moments and their wives. What is that thing for you? What's that future piece that you're looking forward to with your kids?
Run anchor. um, for me, I think we all know what it feels like to be in the presence of somebody operating in greatness, right? Grew up in Chicago. I'll use sports as an analogy. I had an opportunity to see the greatest basketball player, in my opinion, play ball, right? So I got a chance to see Michael Jordan play. And when you watch Michael Jordan play live, that is, it is something about watching somebody be in this space of greatness.
Mm-hmm.
I am happy. I am ecstatic, and I don't want to say anxious because the Bible, I think, says be anxious for nothing. But I really want to see my boys, when they get older, operate in a space in their own space of greatness. Help them find that thing that they were put on this planet to do the best. Put them in that space and watch them go. Right. I feel like that's going to be the thing for me. And the other thing is I want them to be positive figures in society, right? When we look at what's happened down at the Capitol, it's something that I would never want to see my kids participate in that fashion, right? Understand who they are, understand what they need to stand for and be about themselves, but also understand that they are part of a very important culture and people. And there's a strong history behind them, and they owe it to me and the ancestors to stand up in this society and be something and add something positive to it. And that's one of the things that I teach, and my wife for sure absolutely instills in my boys. So I'm looking forward to those two things.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I same thing. My older two, and I'm not too sure about the younger two just yet, because again, they're 15 and 13. So their perspective, of course, I want all my kids to be successful, right, and kind of walk in the path that they want to. I can really speak to the older two and just their passion and what they've experienced so far. So my oldest son, I call him the big cheesecake, right? He loves to bake, and he's self-taught, right? And so for him, and not only does he love to bake, he loves to cook, right? And so one of the things that he's done while he's been away is he's kind of developed his own culinary style of providing for himself, right? So he'll cook for him and some of his friends, but he loves to bake. And so for me to see his passion into cooking and food, I'm hoping that he can become a successful person within the food industry, right? And that he would ultimately, maybe open his business or go into partnership or whatever the case might be. And so, always, and I think he's beginning to see what he can do with cooking and with food. And so hopefully, and again, we've provided tools. Our kitchen has become like, cheesecake central while he's while he's home. I mean, because he's turning out cheesecakes. He has his menu. He sells. He has his marketing tool down. I mean, he's like a one man band, right?
I love it.
And so he has like a business acumen. And so for me, I'm just thinking, okay, well, he kind of knows how to conduct business, and so I just want him to be successful in that realm, right? My second son, he loves sports, right? And so um, he loves to, he's a great speaker, and so he's just wondering how he could kind of infuse sports into communication. We have a running joke. He's like, Dad, when I finish playing, well, at the time he was playing Pop Warner, and so he's like, Dad, when I leave this team, I want to go play for the Lawndale Cardinals. I'm like, okay. And then when I leave high school, I want to go play for the Louisville Cardinals. I'm like, oh, okay. And then he said, yeah, Dad, when I leave college, I want to go play
Mhm.
for the Arizona Cardinals. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. So
Mhm.
for me, that tells me that he has a plan, right? He has his goals.
Yeah.
uh, whether it be, playing, professional in the league, or just being in that space where he's discussing sports on a regular. And so,
Mhm.
for me, I just have to help provide for their vision, and just kind of, again, be that point person about bounce things off. And so, for both of them, I just want them to be successful in the path. The oldest one, he kind of has his path.
Mhm.
The other one is not so far. He just started college. This is beginning his second semester
Gotcha.
in February. And so, they kind of know the path that they want to take. My job is to make sure that they kind of take that path and walk down, go through the ups and downs of college, because there are ups and downs that will be had.
Yep.
Um, and again, for my younger two, I'm just wanting them to excel right now, and then they're going to certainly find their niche,
Mhm.
what they want to do once they, you know, get into high school and think about, okay, well, what kind of career path do I want to take? Because, we've told our kids, like, look, you can't be a bum around here in Riley World. You got to get up and do something,
Right,
right?
right,
My
right.
mom always used to joke. She's
Mhm.
like, "Look, boy, when you graduate high school, I'm gonna kick you out the house in X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "Okay, well." When I did turn 18, I was like, "Okay, I'm still here. I'm in school." So she's just like, "No, I was just playing with you. But as long as you're in school, you're doing something positive, then you're always gonna have a roof over your head." So,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
the older two, they have a path, and whatever the younger two decide to do, again, my role is to make sure that they have the tools
Yeah. Yeah.
that they need to reach their dreams. So
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap this conversation, I'm gonna throw this last one to you guys, and you can end with this. There's a gentleman who's watching this, uh, and he's probably trying to figure out what can he practically do like today.
Yeah.
He might be trying to figure out maybe some things are falling apart relationship wise, or he's trying to figure out I've met a lot of guys recently who are they're at a place with having their kids where they feel overwhelmed, like they don't know what to do. So it's just overwhelming to now have kids. It's like it was an idea, it was a thought. Now I got them, and then now we in this thing, and it's like I don't know what to do, right? T, I'll start with you. If you were to give a guy advice who is, matter of fact, go back 10 years ago,
Mm.
and that gentleman
Mm.
was standing in front of you, and he's waving his hand like, T, look, give me something
Yeah.
practical I could do today to help me start down this path and make inroads into this father thing. What would be the one thing you would give him to help him out?
Oh man, you don't have enough time on the show. If you will kind of allow me, because as you were asking that question, a ton of things popped in my mind. If I could give, instead of just the one, it's
Sure,
like
sure,
really just a condensed version, like
sure,
5 bullet points. My
sure.
5 bullet points are: one, it's okay. It's okay to be where you are, because what you've done is you've recognized that you recognize that you're in a place and you want to be better. So it's okay. As long as you make that decision that I'm not going to be the same person that I was yesterday, that I want to be tomorrow. Evaluate that thing, measure it, communicate, and then execute. Right, whatever that means by whatever standards you're going to do. Decide that it's understand it's okay. Evaluate, measure, communicate, and then execute on that to become a better version of yourself. And if you're better, everybody around you is going to be better. Our job is to make, when we leave a situation, whether we pass on or it's gone, the people we leave behind should be better because we were in their presence.
Yeah, you know, man, that's so dope you said that. One thing my wife knows I always say is that, you know, every day I wake up, I just want to be a better man today than I was yesterday. That's it. Because I can't control I can't do nothing about the past. I can't do nothing about the mistakes I made. I can't do nothing about the wins I had yesterday. Yeah. All I got is what's in front of me. And so I just want to be a better man today than I was yesterday. So that's dope that you laid those out. James, what about you, man?
Well, you know what? I mean, there's a list of things. I would just say a few things. You know, when you think about fatherhood, you cannot do it alone. You shouldn't have to do it alone. And so it's going to be very, very important to have that significant other, and really not play any games. You know, fatherhood is nothing to be joked with. You know, once you start having kids, you know, you're responsible for another person's life, right? And so, you know, you got to have someone who you are willing to do life with, right? And so that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is, you know, put yourself around people who could be a positive influence on your fatherhood. You know, reflect on your upbringing, you know, those good uncles or friends of the family who were able to speak positive things. You know, maybe they can speak a positive word during fatherhood as well. And then the last thing, you know, for me, and we've said this on the talk this evening, it's very important. You have to be present. Because if you're not present and you're not doing the important things that, and sometimes the unimportant things, right? You know, like I talked about sitting down and playing a video game. Well, that might not be important to you, but it's going to be important to that kid who's asking for time, right? And they're asking for time. And so being present kind of encompasses, you know, the time, the money, the resources, you know, the education. And so, and it's okay. The last thing I would say, it's okay if you don't have the answer. Be truthful with yourself. But if you don't have the answer, go somewhere where you can get the answer to the question that you might have as it relates to fatherhood or being a great husband. Someone has the answer, and you have to be open, willing and open to understand what that answer is and make an application to your life to be the best possible father, to be the best possible husband that you can be for your children.
Man, well said. Well, let me say this, fellas, I really appreciate all of you on this evening, man. Thank you for being dynamic fathers who give a crap at the end of the day, in your world. And you know, we don't, in the moment, no, we don't know the impact and we don't know the difference, but they will know. And that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Right. They'll know. They'll know down the road. And so, you know, man, this is another episode in the books of Dynamic Fathers of this series. And so I want to say thank you, James. Thank you, Terrell. Thank you to you who watched and paid this some attention. I will ask you to do a few things. If you found this conversation helpful to you, please give it a share, like, or subscribe, or leave a comment below. And if you share this, tag another guy and let him know there is a space where these types of conversations are going down. And wherever we can, we're going to definitely do our part. Man, this is The World According to Chris. Man, this has been dope. the Dynamic
Hey, man,
Father.
thanks for
Absolutely.
having us, Chris.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
Thanks
appreciate
for
it,
having
man.
us, man.
Thank y'all
And
so
thanks
much.
for having this conversation as well. It's a
Man,
very important conversation. So thank you for having it.
I'm so grateful and excited, and man, I look forward to doing the next one.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, man.